I invite you to check, if you're listening, is there a decision in your life that you've been freaking out about that you actually don't need to make right now? And what if you handed it off to your knowing, to wisdom, to life? Just open-handedly, like, hey, will you give me the answer I need when I need it?
You might be expecting this podcast to discuss hot baths, meditation techniques, and breathing exercises. But really, those are only just pressure releases, and they don't fix the true cause. The true issue is a contracted mind. And a contracted mind creates stress, upset, frustration, and impatience. A relaxed mind creates inspiration, connection, fresh ideas, and solutions to intractable problems. We're going to explore how you can relax into presence. This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life. I was so indecisive. I was so indecisive. It was so bad. If you're like me, you struggled with indecision and decision making in general. It was so difficult for me to make a decision, even small decisions. And I didn't make the best decisions. I don't know if anybody here has made a bad decision. I think it's probably only me. No, I have two guests here today, and they also have made bad decisions in their life. They're not going to share all of them, but we are going to talk about decision making and how you can make better decisions actually by releasing mental tension. So today I have Kevin and Britta. They are a power couple. They're like, we're gonna have to get a name for you, like Kev Brit or Britain. But they're very conscious couple. They are both coaches, incredible coaches in something called the 3 Principles Understanding. They were also on last episode, so you can watch that one. That one was on health, and we had a powerful conversation then. We're going to have another one today around decision making. So welcome to Kevin.
Good to be here.
And welcome, Britta.
Hi.
Decisions. Yeah, I used to have a hard time with decisions before I found this understanding. And I didn't know that decisions can actually be really simple. So we're going to be speaking to that. I feel like Britta has a lot to say on this subject. I'm going to let her start.
I have a lot to say, and I have no idea what I'm going to say or start with. So we'll see what happens.
Better make the right decision.
Better get it right. I better figure it out. Actually, yeah, this need to get things right really fucks us over when it comes to decision making, which I'll speak from my personal experience. I'm not somebody who struggled with decision making. I have leaned more the other direction where I'm like, I'm great at decision making and I always know the right thing to do and I need to make a decision immediately and I need to get it right. And a handful of months ago, Michael McDonald, who I know you had on, gave me the assignment of go make a bunch of mistakes and celebrate every single one. And it was wildly transformative for me. I mean, Kevin was there. He knows. Like, if you were to give me most personality tests, I would test in such a way where I'd get labeled a perfectionist, probably. And so this need to get things right was really, I don't know, just prevalent for me. Just, oh my gosh, I can't make a mistake. I got to get it right. Somehow that didn't mess me up from making decisions, but there was a lot of need to prove that the decisions I had made were the right ones. was almost like justify it in retrospect.
Yeah.
And as I started to play with, I'm going to celebrate my mistakes, like actually celebrate it. Like when I make a mistake internally or externally, be like, yes, found this little celebration posture. Suddenly everything got a lot more fun and easy, and tried a lot of things outside of my comfort zone. And this comes up for me around decision making because I've actually seen this be really helpful for people with decisions. It's like, number one, what if you're allowed to make a not correct decision? What if that's okay and it's just not that big of a deal? Like, what if it doesn't matter if you move to this state or this state? Just hypothetically, what if you picked one and then just saw what happened and it was okay if you made a mistake? That was not where I was planning to go with this at all, but that's what just came out. So
I actually think I have an understanding of why we think that we have to make the right decision. And the reason that we think that we have to make the right decision is because we think that our feeling and our well-being is tied to the right decision. We think that we're going to be happier in this state rather than that state. We think that we're going to be happier with this job rather than that job. Or even something as silly as like this little gadget rather than that little gadget. And there's something that happens when we understand that our well-being doesn't come from the decisions that we make, that it comes from our thinking of them in the moment, that frees us to make the mistakes. Then we can not worry about having perfection.
Yeah, and that two stories are coming to mind. So I played poker professionally for 10 years. And there was one point in my career where I was so stressed. Like there was so much pressure. There was so much I was struggling. And it got to the point, it got so bad that I just got to this point where I was like, fuck it. Like I quit. Like I'm not doing this anymore. This is so stressful. And it really looked to me like poker was so stressful. And so then I don't know, for 5 or 6 days I just did like whatever I wanted. It was like vacation feeling. It was more of that. And then it just occurred. Then I like wanted to go play poker. And I was like, and I went and I played poker that day, and I was on fire. Like I was just in that flow state peak. Like I played so well. And so much of it was because all of the pressure, like to get it right and figure out this complex game, and like if like all of that went away because I was like, well, I'm not doing this professionally anymore. So like I don't need to know so I was just free. Long story short, I end up playing probably half the hours I would normally play for the rest of that month. I make like 2 or 3 times as much money as I've ever made. I was the best player in Chicago at that poker room for sure that month. Like I was just and I felt good. It was simple. It was easy. Problem was I didn't have this understanding. So I didn't really see what was going, and then I ended up eventually like getting back into creating pressure and couldn't see that I was the one doing it. I don't know where I'm going with this story, but it's just, you got something?
yeah. It's a tangent, but I got something. Yeah, I just like, I feel like it's really important to name up front that there's no such thing as a big decision. And we create so much pressure when we think something's a big decision or it's a big deal. Or we have categories, things like where I live, job decision, like if I take the job or not, the person I marry, if I get married or not, if I move. And these are big decisions in our mind. But what I order to eat tonight isn't a big decision. And I want to bring into the conversation that there is no such thing as a big decision. Things occur to us as big based on how we're painting them with our thinking. And you actually don't know what the decision is going to be that could change your life. I think of movies that point to this, like The Butterfly Effect, or what's the one with the laundromat, where they own the laundromat together and tax
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, yeah, these moments in culture that point to, but you do know that it could be the little decision that changes everything in your life. But for some reason, we've decided, no, it's these big ones. And sometimes the big one doesn't make a big difference. You actually don't know. And so I just invite that question, if you're listening, as part of this conversation. What if there's no such thing as a big decision?
And actually, if you think that it's a really big decision, that's a great guide. That's what you probably shouldn't make the decision then. Because our thinking changes, our thinking is transitory. So it goes up and down, and the bigness of the decision, it looks bigger and bigger if we think about it in a certain way, and less big when we think about it in a certain way. And it's actually when it doesn't seem like a decision, when you just kind of find yourself doing it. That has transformed my decision making. Because if it feels like a big decision, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to back away.
And I want to bring in the conversation as well, like this conversation of wisdom, of intuition, of knowing that we have this intelligence in us that knows things without knowing how we know them, but we just know things. And there's part like just like accepting that, looking in that direction, getting a feel for that feeling, which feels different than the kind of overthinking analysis. Like they feel different. And the more that we get a feel for that, the more we get a feel for like, oh, that's wisdom. And we test that route. We go like, what I've seen is that's when for me, I've seen it with Britta, we've seen it with clients, like that's when our lives become more simple, more amazing, the miraculous things happen. We live a more guided life. Like it happens when we get a feel for wisdom and we start following that more. And we were talking about this earlier. It's also so you can get a feel for that. But well, I'm remembering and it speaks to like there's no big decision. And so I was getting more and more of a feel for this working with Michael McDonald. And there was a lot of experience in our coaching where like I would just be saying something and then he would just reflect back to me like, it sounds like you know what to do. And then I would be like, and then I would realize like, oh yeah, I do. And then we had a call, and I around my relationship with Britta. And we started exploring the topic, and man, I was so caught up. Like the amount of thinking and stressful stuff, like there was so much noise in the system. But there was still that same, like, we could both like, it sounds like you know what to do. And that decision could have been seen as a big decision.
Do you want to say what the decision was?
Yeah, I'm getting
okay.
That decision was to be in lifelong partnership with this woman. And it was fascinating to be like, to have all my thinking that was terrifying, that was like But like, even with all of that, so it's like, I didn't even have to have a quiet mind. The quiet mind certainly helps and I prefer it and that feels better. But like, even with that storm, was still able to find like, wow, even with all that, somehow I just know I can feel this is okay. And so, and then Britta, and I remember she ended up, because it was on recording, it is a longer story, but she ended up went back to like watch the thing one time and was sort of struck by how she's like, man, you guys were like talking all that. And then once I just got like clarity that it was like, oh yeah, okay, that's okay, cool. I'm going to propose to her now. And then we just like very quickly went on to like, okay, we talked about the next thing. And she was just like, but it was like, for me, it was just really, it was like, oh yeah, I saw it. I got the clarity. It's simple. I trust wisdom. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, something that's really interesting that happens when you have what I call that what you experience, a decision from clarity, a decision from your knowing, your intuition knowing, maybe spiritual knowing or wisdom. You've called it wisdom. You can call it whatever you want. But there's just this settled knowing. And it feels very different. And there's something so grounding about that. That even when you're caught up in something later on, like for my relationship, I saw this knowing, and it acts as kind of like an anchor, even when I get into my own thought storms and my own clouds. And so it still connects me. It's kind of like a lifeline. Or another metaphor is, I think it's Theseus who goes into the labyrinth and he has a thread that someone gives him. And sometimes we get lost in the labyrinth of our own minds. And that knowing wisdom, that's a thread back home to yourself. And it doesn't matter how lost you get, because you can just follow that back home.
Yeah, what I appreciate about, well, so many things about that. It was just so funny to listen to after the fact because of how calm it was. I was like, that was like not a big decision. And he said, yeah, no, because it like it when you know it, like you said earlier, it doesn't occur as a big decision. It's just the thing to do. There's this quality of choicelessness to it. It's just, oh, I'm going here now. Like that thing, that wisdom thing, that inner knowing thing. It's just, it's leading me and I'm playing the I follow it game because cool stuff happens when I do that. But what I also like about that story is that you weren't totally free from the thinking or being caught up. Like that was very much part of that. Like, oh my God, I have all this stuff around the word marriage and what that means and being trapped. And like you saw that and that was still happening and you just knew what your knowing was also.
Yeah.
And it's so valuable because I hear so like often these days this narrative around your gut feeling, which can be really helpful. And I also see it sometimes getting misconstrued with feeling your thinking.
Will you tell this story?
Yeah. So, okay. So I bought a bike recently, a bicycle, which pretty small thing in the grand scheme of life, had a lot of emotional charge to it for me. I'd had a pretty traumatic bike accident when I was 14 years old and tore up my face, and it was pretty intense. And so I was going to buy a bike and Kevin was taking me and I was like, oh, feeling very nervous. I was also on my bleed, so feeling quite like vulnerable, exposed in the world. And we were at this used bike dealer. It was like a used car man, like used car salesman guy, but for bikes, just like hustling, doing his like small business thing, very much like salesman tactics. That like buy this thing kind of pressure and kind of the like, are you going to get it now? I'll lower this price. And I had the feeling in my system of like, oh, I don't like some things about him and this experience, and I feel kind of icky, and I don't really want to be out in the world right now, and I don't want to be seen, and like buying a bike feels really emotional for me because I fell off it 17 years ago and it was really scary. And I had like all this thinking and feeling, and some of that gut feeling, if I were to just have that language, would have been telling me like, nope, turn around, get in the car. But I know that wisdom is something different. And so a couple of times I checked in with wisdom. I was like, okay, wisdom, like, what do I do? And it was just said, oh, that's your bike. And I was like, okay. And then I felt some more stuff and I was like, okay, wisdom. It was like, that's your bike. And it was so clear and simple. And I still had thinking and feeling that if I didn't know that this knowing was different than just my like emotional response in the moment, I would have been 100% certain like the vibes in there were bad. I didn't like some things about that. Like, no, that's my knowing. And it's really, really valuable to get a distinction, to get a feel for that wisdom, inner knowing clarity versus I'm having like a response in my body right now. And sometimes they're the same thing, but sometimes they're not. Like I think of our feelings versus our felt knowing. And sometimes that knowing, wisdom lands in your body like a feeling. And sometimes it's telling you to do a thing, or this is the obvious, clear, like marry her, buy the bike decision. But all of my psychology is freaking out for some other reason.
And I love these spots too, because they look to me like they're also some of they're really I mean, I'm making this up too, that they're really big, but it's like they're also really big in a way because that's when we're bumping up against our edge, where it's like the like ego is like, no, 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 don't do it. But actually like listening for wisdom and finding those are often the opportunities that like open us up to like a much bigger life. It's like showing up on our edge, on that like next big growth expansion point. And if we don't have that capacity to like discern wisdom versus overthinking, then we can then turn away from, like, I could have turned away from what looks like one of the best decisions I've made. And obviously I'm making up that decision too, because it's all made up. But like, so that practice of noticing it even in when there's a lot of stuff going on, I think is just it's really helpful.
And I think a lot of times we can wait for things to settle. Because you were pointing to that there's this knowing that's underneath the surface of our ego mind that can cloud things over and cover it up. And we can still feel into that, even when we're kind of caught up in it. But also sometimes we don't see it. And we have to wait. And we can just wait. And that's an okay thing, to not know, to let it be in the space of unknown until you know. It's either yes, no, or I don't know. I think Michael Neal talks about that. Yes, no, I don't know. Those are the three decisions. And I think a lot of people have a problem with I don't know. And in this understanding, I don't know is actually the best place to be, because something new comes from that. When I was so afraid of having a daughter or a child, my wife really wanted a child, and I was afraid. I wasn't ready. I had a lot of fears, a lot of overthinking around it. And I just waited. I was exploring this understanding, and there suddenly came a time when I was just driving home, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to have a kid. I'm ready. I'm not afraid anymore. And the ego fear that was clouding everything just suddenly dropped away. And I am pretty sure that if I had not discovered this understanding, I wouldn't be where I am right now, where I have a 5-month-old daughter. She's amazing, so funny, hilarious, and such a bright little being in my life. And maybe you wouldn't have this relationship, but you'd still be okay. And I would still be okay. But it's okay if fear clouds. It's okay if we fall into our own big decisions of making it a mountain out of something that's not a big deal. Because it feels like a mountain at the time. And you just wait. We think that it's a mountain and it's going to forever be a mountain. This huge decision in my life. And there are times when it just shrinks. And that is the time to make the decision. When you feel clear, when you feel settled, when it kind of feels obvious, and you're like, oh, of course. Why didn't I think of it that way sooner? That's when to make the decision. And it's okay to wait for that time like I did for my daughter.
Yeah, I want to like sort of yes and that. 'Cause I was thinking, I had a client last week who had like some area of their life that there was just a ton of avoidance and overthinking about. And then they had made up this imaginary mountain, oh, this impossible, and then are in that, and then didn't even want to like start doing the thing because it looked so big. So we sort of noticed like, oh yeah, okay, that pattern's going on. Like, yeah, that's like getting caught up in that. And then it was something like I just brought him to like, do you know a next step? And like and we had sort of settled and just thinking, and then he started sharing with me essentially something like he shared something. I was like, it sounds like the next step is to like have a couple conversations and ask people like, hey, who do you know? Do you know anybody who? And before that, it was this giant thing, and then it was the simplicity of just, oh, just like have a conversation and ask, who do I know? So simple, so ordinary. And often like wisdom, it doesn't give us the whole grand plan a lot of times, but it gives you that next step to just be like, hey, yeah, just go. And then just poof, like so simple. This area of his life that was stuck, that looked like I had this big block around it, and it was just, oh, I need to just ask some people I know, like, hey, do you know anybody?
I wrote a poem a while ago that talked about that we don't have this searchlight. I think we want this like this full illumination of all of our problems and all of our decisions. And then the steps A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through the alphabet. But like you mentioned, wisdom doesn't work in that way because wisdom is always of the moment. And it's more like a candle. And we can only see the next step. But you can make your entire journey that way. You don't need to see the whole path to take the next step and the one after that. And that's freeing. Even though it might be a little bit scary to not be able to see past the candle, you can trust that you will know what to do next.
Yeah, and sometimes the what to do next is nothing. Like, I would argue most of the time. It's like, what do you know to do next? Oh, there's nothing to do. And sometimes it's, yeah, there's nothing to do because I don't know yet. So I can just hang out in not knowing. And oh, actually, this decision doesn't need to be made today or this week. Or like I had a conversation with a client last week, about a decision that was coming up that needed to be made over a month from now. And she was scaring herself so much about it and like freaking out and so much overthinking. And then she just saw, oh my God, I don't have to make this decision for a month. And I don't know what decision I'm going to make right now. And I don't actually need to know. So I am allowed to just like close that tab, put that box away, and I trust that I will know what I need to know when I need to know it. And we're doing that to ourselves all the time with decision making. Like, I think that's part of why there's so much intensity and pressure. Like, and I invite you to check if you're listening, is there a decision in your life that you've been freaking out about that you actually don't need to make right now? And what if you handed it off to your knowing, to wisdom, to life? Just open-handedly, like, hey, will you give me the answer I need when I need it? You have another story coming to mind. Yeah, another client conversation recently. And yeah, what she said to me was, I'm really good at making decisions when I have no time. Like when the decision has to be made this minute, I know what to do. I always know what to do. And I make a decision and it's a great decision and I feel proud of it and it works out well. But when I have a lot of time, then I suck at decision making. Because what was happening was when she had a lot of time, then she was overthinking it. And it's when there's no time to overthink, then you just kind of know what to do. At least this was true for her. And it's not actually that having less time is the magic to making decisions. It's you are allowed to stop overthinking things. You actually don't have to keep overthinking things. It's not helpful.
It is a relaxing, it sounds like what you're talking about. You relax into the unknown and let it be okay to not know. And that just is a relaxing. That just releases the mental tension, the overthinking. And we tend to make way better decisions with a relaxed mind. There's a story that Dick and Bettinger tells about a client who she would only feel good like 5 minutes in a day. Like she only had like I would call that a window of clarity. And a lot of the work that I do with clients is expanding the window of clarity. But if you have 5 minutes to work with, that's okay. And that's what you have to work with. And she could tell that she had these 5 minutes because she would feel free. She would feel light. And the rest of the time she was heavy. She was in her head. And then she came to Dickon and told him, you know what? I just started making decisions in that 5 minutes and I made the best decisions of my life. And that's all you have to do. What if it was that simple? And of course, the more that you look in this direction of the understanding how your mind works, how mind, consciousness, and thought create your experience of life, the more of a window in your life of clarity that you will have, the more windows you will have. And she came back to him and she said, guess what? Half the time. And she came back a little bit later and said, guess what? Only 5 minutes of being contracted. And now she can make decisions pretty much whenever she wants. She just knows when not to make the decision. Yeah.
I just like, I want to, we spoke to it some earlier, but that like knowing not to make the decision. Like you were speaking to when it feels like a really big decision, that's probably not the time to make the decision. And having a feel for that is really helpful too. Oh, I'm pretty low on the ladder of consciousness right now. I have, yeah, I got this metaphor from Michael Neal, but like 5 bars, like if you were like a cell phone, if you had 5, like you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 bars based on like how you're doing. If I have 1 or 2 bars, that's probably not the time to make decisions. If I don't have to. Sometimes you do. Sometimes there's a decision that has to be made. And in that moment, the wisdom, the knowing is still there too. And having a feel for, oh, I'm trying to figure this thing out right now and go into decision making. Okay, where am I at? Oh, yeah, I'm not in that window of clarity. So maybe we won't make the decision right now. And I really trust that that moment of clarity, that window, that like we're just kind of designed to float back up. I think about it often as being human bodies underwater. Like your body will naturally float back up to the surface. And you're going to float up quicker if you're not thrashing around. It's like, okay, this is where I'm at. Kind of in the middle of the ocean. Looks a little scary and dark down here. But oh, eventually you will float back up to the surface. And then you'll know what to do.
It reminds me, there's that story of there was some company that had this understanding, and they put into their, I think they were a hedge fund, and they put into their handbook one like decision by chairlift, I think it was called, something like this, because they knew, and so when like they knew this stuff that we're talking about, when it would get like when there's like a lot of looked like there were a lot of big decisions to make, and it started getting stressful, they would actually send everybody out to like go ski, like go get on the chairlift, because they knew like if we're really stressed and it looks like there's all these big decisions to make, we're going to make our best decisions when we send our brain on vacation, and so they would just like, yeah, just go skiing, like don't spend time trying to figure this out thing. And then the people would just like be on the chairlift or be skiing down, or later that day just taking a shot, and it would just, oh yeah, that's the thing. They weren't trying to figure it out. They weren't doing more analysis. It's actually the recognition of like, oh wow, I'm really caught up. So yeah, now it's time to just like go do something else. I mean, that's what happened to me with the poker example too. It was like, I didn't know that's what I was doing, but it was so bad that it was like, I quit. I essentially just sent my brain on vacation for a few days. Then I floated back up, and then I was just like playing at such a high level. And that's available to us all the time. It's just like Britta said, it's noticing like, where am I? Where am I? Oh, I'm lower. And usually when we notice where we're at, it usually becomes more clear of just like, oh yeah, I got 1 bar right now. Like not the time to work on that like new, that new project or that big thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go for a walk or talk to a friend. Know that I don't have to do anything or figure anything out or fix anything to make my level of consciousness go up. Like Britta said, it just goes up on its own.
And it's so simple once you see it. Like I was sitting with a client a few weeks ago, and she was trying to figure out her plan for the rest of the year. And she was really low, like just really low. And she saw how low she was and just started laughing. She was like, oh my God, why would I try to make big decisions for this year in my life? Quote, big decisions, but like, we'll use that for now. Like, why am I trying to map out my life and my year when I'm feeling so low right now? Like, wise decisions are not going to happen from this place. And it's like, you just see it and then it's funny and you don't have to make the decision then.
Yeah, I just love, like, this has been happening in both our work with clients and also like us as client with our coach lately. A lot of like the last 6 months, there's been a lot of like looking in these directions and then laughing when we all realize the really stupid thing, like just where I just realized like, oh my God, that's really dumb. I've been doing that. I'm going to stop doing that. I don't need to heal my childhood trauma. I can just stop doing it. Once I see that it's dumb, I can just stop doing it. And it's like the lightness that's like just in our work now. It's just so much fun. So much fun to just like a lot of these experiences of just you see it and then you're like, oh yeah, that's a really dumb idea. Why would I be really low on the ladder right now trying to plan my whole year? Yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. And you don't need willpower to not do it. Once you see that it's like, oh, that's dumb. But before you see it, then if you don't see it, then.
And then the next step is you really beat yourself up about being dumb for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's if you need step 2, that's what you do. Really self-berate.
Yeah. The beating yourself, like a lot of people think it actually releases mental tension. It's one of the most helpful things we can do. It's just most people aren't doing it enough.
Yeah, you have to get to the edge, and then once you get past,
like these people just aren't going all the way. Like, but once you realize you just got to really punish yourself.
Give me the thing. And what I'm also hearing that I would like our audience to hear is that the feeling never lies. You can always trust your feeling to show you where you're at in that decision-making capability. And if you're feeling low, it often seems like a really good idea to make decisions when you're feeling low. Seems like you're like, I think I need to make this decision now.
Because then I'll be okay. Yeah, because I'm not feeling okay. And once the decision is made and I make the right decision, then I'll be okay.
Yes. But actually, the feeling is always your guide, and it's always going to be 100% accurate for you. And if you can recognize that and see that and be guided by that, decisions become simple and easy. You release mental tension. And once you've released mental tension, then you make the decision. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. People are going to listen to this and they'll be like, they sound like they're amazing with clients. They're going to want to reach out to you. How can they reach out to you? And also, maybe one final thought could be a story, a little tidbit that you feel like brings this home for you. Britta, you get to go first this time.
Yeah. My website is brittakristen.com. Kristen's with an I-N. And you can email me at britta@brittakristen.com. I love connecting with people and hearing from them. So if something in this resonated with you and you just want to share that, I would love to hear. You're more than welcome to email me. Yeah, I'll share that. I don't know if I've ever sat with someone and them not known what to do. In that moment of when we slow down and I ask, what do you know to do next? What's the next single thing? What's the next single step? What do you know to do? They always know. We always know. You always know. And it might not be what I'm going to do next year. It probably won't be that. It probably won't be what I'm going to do. What's my 5-step plan? What I'm going to do in that sense. Because side note, you don't need a 5-step plan. But what do I know to do right now? Or what do I know to do next? That's really available to you.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes something really simple, like take a break, go for a walk, call up this person, ask this person for, it's often really simple and ordinary and mundane. You can find me kevinlawrence.org. You can email me at kevin@kevinlawrence.org. Final thing. Let's see. don't believe anything that we've said. Like, don't take our word for any of this. Go look for yourself. Go experiment. Go explore, and go really explore and see what you notice for you. Yeah, don't believe anything we're saying.
This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life. I'm on a mission to help people release their mental tension because I know that it helps them to be more capable, creative, and compassionate human beings. And I need your help. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like more resources, visit richliferealization.com. Your vibrant life is a single thought away.